Hello and welcome. So today we're going to take a brief look at your export options inside of Lightroom Classic. So I've got my image selected here that we're going to be using, and there are a few different ways of getting to your exporting dialog box inside of Lightroom. So you can right click on the image and click export, and then you have a few options here. You can click export down here in the bottom left, or you can go up here to file and click export, and there's also keyboard shortcuts here. Control Alt Shift E will do with the previous settings, and then if you just want to bring up the dialog box, it's just Control Shift E. So let's go ahead and we're going to start the export process. Make sure our image is selected. First, let's just kind of go over a couple of settings, and then we'll create us a preset. So it's pretty simple. You have a bunch of different options here. First is where it exports to. You can select desktop, any of your default library folders here on Windows. You can use, whatever. You can, I generally do this, even if I know that it's just going to the desktop, I usually choose the choose folder later. And then that way I can create a folder, put it where I want, and all the images export there. One thing I will point out is if you are going to a library folder like your desktop or documents or, one of these or a different folder, I would highly recommend, unless it's already empty, let me specify, unless it's already empty and you have a folder specifically made for your exports, I would tell it to put in a subfolder and then call that subfolder something. So that way you don't have 100 photos inside the root of that folder unless that's where it's meant to go. Like you don't want 100 photos to be exported out directly to your desktop. That'd make it kind of messy, and you'd have to go back and delete all those anyways. So I definitely, if you're going to go to your desktop or documents or something like that, use one of these. I would recommend put in subfolder and then name it something. So that way, if it is something temporary like images you're putting on Facebook or something like that, you can delete those easily. You also have the option to rename the files. I don't really mess with this because I don't really care. I don't have anything right now that I do that requires a sequence. I guess you could if you were doing like a time lapse and the names weren't sequential for whatever reason coming right off your camera. You could make it a little easier on yourself and do a sequence, custom name sequence or file name sequence, something like that. You can change extension case. Lightroom does support video, so you can include videos in the quality and that kind of thing. I don't ever use Lightroom for video. It's just it's not my workflow. I've always used it just for photos, and that's what I tend to use it for. Next, if we come down, we have file settings. Now, this is where you can change it to PSDs, JPEGs, bunch of different. Even if you could do digital, so that way, so if you're exporting out a raw photo, raw image, like you've made some changes, you still want the raw image, you can send out. Now that raw images, they use sidecars and sidecars to do the changes, so it's non-destructive. I haven't really seen a use for this one. DNG is a digital negative file. PNG, of course, is kind of more of a web. It supports transparency. TIFF, it's another file format. I believe it supports transparency. I'm not 100% sure on the details of TIFF and why you would use it over a JPEG. Besides, you can get a little bit better quality out of a TIFF, I believe, than you can a JPEG. And then obviously you have your PSD, which is your Photoshop file. So you have a bunch of different options here. Generally, if I'm exporting, I'm using either PNG or JPEG, depending on where I'm going. If I'm doing just Facebook or putting them on my website, I generally just do a JPEG, color space to stay at sRGB. You can also change it to an Adobe RGB if you want. I don't mess with this too much if it's going on the web. Quality, I usually set that around 80. And then only if if there's specific limits on a site that I'm uploading to, will I limit the file size. Because some of the HDR images that I work with or panorama images that I work with, they get fairly big. And so then I might, limit the file size. But that's really, I don't use that too often. It's only in specific situations. Image resizing. This is another one that I only use if there are certain restraints coming off of a website that I will size to fit. And I usually do along the long edge, so I don't have to do a whole lot of mathematics. So I just say 1,000 pixels, or if I know the long edge on the website, which generally if they'll tell you what the dimensions need to be, I'll go ahead and put that in here. And then if I'm doing for screen, meaning like I'm exporting to Facebook or something like that, I change this down to 72 pixels per inch. That's what your screen displays. It doesn't display a higher generally. And then these modern displays may be denser, but generally you're going to be okay with just doing 72 pixels per inch. Now, if I am giving a high-res image to clients, I change this back to 240, or sometimes I'll even go as high as 330, just kind of depending. I haven't used 330 in a long time. 240 generally does the job for me. And so you can do a couple of different things down here. This is more the metadata. You can choose to remove this metadata here. You can also sharpen. I don't do this because I do all my sharpening in the software anyways. So I don't use this at all. I don't do any post-processing. If I'm uploading to my website, which I haven't used this in a while, but you can, and I used to, if I was putting them on Facebook or my website, I would add a watermark, and then you can make your own here, or you can upload your own graphic and put your own watermark on these exported photos. And you can choose where it goes. Bottom left or bottom right is generally where you would put these. You could put them in the center. I usually put them in the bottom right corner. And I usually did a graphic. I would choose my graphic and then put it in the bottom right corner. I don't use watermarks very much anymore. It's just I've kind of gotten away from using watermarks at this point. Might pick it up in the future again. Don't really know. But yeah, you can do that. Post-processing, you can decide to open them up in Photoshop. You can put them in, Show and Explore, put them in another application. So this is where if you were exporting out like those PSDs or maybe even those RAW files, you could say when it's done exporting, go ahead and open those bad boys up in Photoshop. I want to do some more edits. You could do that. That's not part of my workflow, but it is an option there. So now that we've kind of walked through all of the different kind of little sub dialogues, if you would. Let's make us a preset. So you have plugins. I don't really use any of these because I don't upload directly to Facebook or anything like that. I tend to choose where I go and upload manually, just because I like the control. I don't really use a lot of plugins to do that. I don't upload to Adobe stock or anything like that right now. Those are just kind of built in. So, but I do use presets for different things. So let's make a preset where I'm going to upload to Facebook. So I would choose. We're going to put them on the desktop. We're going to export these to desktop, and I'm just going to say put them in the folder Facebook. And then generally I would put today's date. So I'm just going to put date because, that's usually what I do. I'm not going to rename the files anything because that doesn't really matter. Height and width, I am going to change these to 72 pixels per inch. I haven't come across any issues with, file size, that kind of thing. I will change this to 80 just to kind of keep it down a little bit. Remove personal info, location info, that's fine. Not going to do a watermark, all that. So once you get your settings selected the way you want, you don't click export, click add. And now this is going to be, oh crap, I screwed it up. Let's rename it. If I could type, we're going to rename it to Facebook. So let's say that I'm here, okay? And you can see that it's changed some of the images. The settings like resize to fit. It's brought the quality down to 50, all this. Well, when you click the Facebook, it goes back to those changes that we set earlier. So presets can be very helpful if you have a bunch of different scenarios where you're exporting photos, and you have settings for each of those scenarios, and you don't want to go back and try and recreate or, write them out on a list and be sure you're following it. You can just create a preset, click on the preset that fits your situation, and export your photos. That's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative to you. If you'd like to see more of this stuff, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you would like to see. And if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section down below as well. So I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you later.